Hi everyone, and welcome to our presentation entitled A Content Analysis of the Intersection Between Social Media and Culture, Implications for Sustainable Food System Communication. My name is Catherine Dobbins, and I would like to extend a special thank you to my fellow co-authors, Dr. Masambuka-Kanchewa and Dr. Alexa Lamm. All of us are from the University of Georgia in the United States. Social media has become a source of both scientific and pseudoscientific information. Social media has also radically changed human communication and interaction patterns. A concept that is becoming crucial to understanding social media engagement is identity. Social media users create platforms where members identify with and embrace others in order to feel valued and accepted within a social media space. Through social media, they can feel heard and respected for their thoughts and feelings, especially from other like-minded individuals. When looking at social media, culture, and agriculture, there are several concepts to consider. Changing demographics and communication technologies have affected public perception of agriculture, and in some cases, like in the US, the public's connection to agriculture. Agricultural and natural science communication messages are dependent on the cultural characteristics of the audience members receiving those messages. However, limited research is available looking at the intersection of culture, agricultural and science communications, and social media. We know that effective science communication strategies are dependent on understanding an audience's cultural orientation. In order to find a framework for this study, we decided to use social representations theory to help us investigate this intersection. Social representations are systems of opinions, knowledge, and beliefs that are particular to a culture, a social category, or a group in regard to the objects they have in their social environment. Social representations facilitate communication processes in social groups. They also provide identities and norms for understanding social reality within these groups, acting as a reference point for any messages they may encounter. Social representations theory is useful for us to understand how an issue is represented in society and how people perceive the issue, thus making it an excellent theoretical framework for this science communication study. The purpose of this study is to explore how cultural identity impacts use, engagement, and trust in social media messages. 3 research questions guided this study. The first is, how do people identify themselves culturally while engaging on social media? How do people's cultural identities affect their choice of individuals to follow or interact with on social media? And how do people's cultural identities affect their engagement with social media platforms for agricultural and natural resource information? To begin investigating this intersection between culture, communication, and agricultural and natural resources, as well as social media, we decided to conduct a qualitative, systematic literature review. The criteria for the articles were that they had to be peer-reviewed and published between 2009 and 2019. We reviewed the titles and abstracts for the articles and selected them based on their relevance to the concepts of social media, cultural identity, cross-cultural communication, agriculture, and any combination of these 4 related concepts. 50 articles were analyzed in total using a content analysis. Through the analysis, we achieved a 70.59% inter-rater reliability, or agreement among coded segments. All analysis occurred in MaxQDA, the version released in 2020. Results will be separated based on relevant research question. 4 themes emerged in relation to the first research question: how do people identify themselves culturally while engaging on social media? One general finding from the content analysis demonstrated that identity and culture mediates how we use technology. Relating to identity, 3 process themes emerged: identity formation, identity reinforcement, and identity performance. For those in the millennial or Gen Z generations, social identity is one of the primary drivers for social media use globally. Young adults, especially during the years entering into university, use social media to curate and test a new social identity. Social media allows users to construct or form an online social identity, as well as to test out that identity and reinforce it in this new online space. Through this process, we can see a movement from social identity in the traditional sense to a social media identity. This social media identity is a process that occurs between an individual's history, their community, their online engagement, and the new identity formation that occurs through social media. 2 themes emerged from the second research question, which was, how do people's cultural identities affect their choice of individuals to follow or interact with on social media? These 2 themes were community and motivations for social media use. Social media can allow an individual to feel like part of a community despite a lack of a shared physical location. For example, people may join a Facebook group to voice their opinion or share their beliefs with like-minded individuals. Motivations for social media use included maintaining and forming connections and relationships with people. People often use social media not only to maintain these close social ties, but also as an information source about current events. So we see social media being used for these relational aspects as well as the informational aspects. 2 themes emerged relating to the third research question, which was, how do people's cultural identities affect their engagement with social media platforms for agricultural and natural resource information? These 2 themes were message acceptance and diverse viewpoints. Demographic variables such as political party affiliation, religion, family history, career, and geographic location influence the public's perception of scientific messages, especially those related to climate change and agriculture. These identity factors influence the public's perception of the trustworthiness of a specific communication message or strategy as it relates to their lived experiences and values. So when scientific information and messaging contradicts an individual's beliefs or values learned through the social representations of an identity group, individuals may conform to their group's belief rather than accept the message. People interacted with diverse viewpoints on social media, mostly in negative ways, most likely through arguments relating to controversial topics on Twitter or Facebook. Within agriculture, there were positive interactions when it came to learning about food, but this varied between agriculturalists. Navigating heated discussions through social media platforms such as Twitter was viewed as a challenge from agricultural and natural resource scientists' viewpoints. Transparency, such as farmers explaining their process, helped improve communication between diverse groups. Audience segmentation based on these identity factors may help with communication strategies for agricultural and natural resources. Within agriculture specifically, the focus of the research is more from the content creators and much less from the content users. Content creators, specifically agriculturalists, were interested in using social media to share stories about production agriculture to achieve trust and transparency with consumers. They also wanted to diversify the audiences they reached with their message. Most studies from the field of agricultural communications focused on describing the participants in terms of their position in society or their connection to agriculture. This was often for marketing purposes or reputation or branding preservation in the case of production agriculture. Issues of culture were addressed in terms of the information provider's belief about the impact of social media and not in terms of describing their identities or cultural orientation. The field does address culture and other factors with communication, but as social media has radically changed how we communicate, it's imperative to understand how culture impacts engagement with non-agricultural audiences when interacting on social media, to understand how to disseminate agricultural and ecological messages to yield behavior change. Within other sectors of natural resource science and communication, the focus was primarily on content or social media users and their interpretations of this content based on certain demographic characteristics, such as politics, which was very popular in studies relating to climate change. Few studies, though, described how an individual's holistic social identity and the different identities that they may embody as an individual could impact their perception of science communication messages. This remains an area in need of further research to go beyond culture and demographics to understand how identity really impacts our engagement with and understanding of specific messaging strategies. It's apparent through this literature review that more research is needed to understand the intersection of culture, social identity, social media, and its related implications for science communication. We know, as both users and observers of social media, that it's radically changed how we communicate and interact with one another. So there's a need to understand how culture and identity impacts engagement with non-agricultural or non-environmental audiences. This is to ultimately encourage behavior change. Through the effective dissemination of agricultural, scientific, and ecological messages, we're hoping that these strategies can encourage people to engage in sustainable behavior change. These are the references used for the background information. We are happy to provide any of the specific articles reviewed in the literature review upon request. Thank you all for listening.